let's get into this book. I was too stoked about it. I was like, I have to keep going. Like, I'm gonna have to give you this video a lot sooner than you expected. All right, so where was I? She was known as Scarlet. At that time, she was selling arms, although it was beginning to lose its savor. She never stuck at one job for very long. 400 years at the outside, you didn't want to get her in a rut. Her hair was true auburn, neither ginger nor brown, but a deep and burnished copper color, and it fell to her waist in tresses that men would kill for, and indeed often had. Her eyes were a startling orange. She looked 25 and always had. She had a dusty brick-red truck full of assorted weaponry and an almost unbelievable skill at getting it across any border in the world. She had been on her way to a small West African country where a minor civil war was in progress to make a delivery which would, with any luck, turn it into a major civil war. Unfortunately, the truck had broken down far beyond even her ability to repair it, and she was very good with machinery these days. She was in the middle of a city at that time, and the city in question was the capital of Cumbalala land. Whatever, okay? An African nation which had been at peace for the last 3,000 years. For about 30 years, it was Sir Humphrey Clarkson land, but since the country had absolutely no mineral wealth and the strategic importance of a banana, it was accelerated toward self-government with almost unseemly haste. Kumbala land, whatever, okay, was poor, perhaps and undoubtedly boring, but peaceful. Its various tribes who got along with one another quite happily had long since beaten their swords into plowshares. A fight had broken out in the city square in 1952 between a drunken ox drover and an equally drunken ox thief. People were still talking about it. Scarlet yawned in the heat. She fanned her head with her broad-brimmed hat, left the useless truck in the dusty street, and wandered into a bar. She bought a can of beer, drained it, then grinned at the barman. "I got a truck, needs repairing," she said. "Anyone around I can talk to?" The barman grinned, white and huge and expansively. He'd been impressed by the way she drank her beer. Only Nathan missed, but Nathan has gone back to Gowanda to see his father-in-law's farm. Scarlet bought another beer, so this Nathan, any idea when he'll be back? Perhaps next week. Perhaps 2 weeks' time, dear lady. Oh, that Nathan. He is a scamp, no? He leaned forward. "You traveling alone, miss?" He said. "Yes." "Could be dangerous. Some funny people on the roads these days. Bad men. Not local boys," he added quickly. Scarlet raised a perfect eyebrow. And despite the heat, he shivered. "Thanks for the warning," Scarlet purred. Her voice sounded like something that lurks in the long grass, visible only by the twitching of its ears, until something young and tender wobbles by. She tipped her hat to him and strolled outside. I feel like my drink is a little too far away from me. Hold up, gangstas. Deal with my ass, okay? Okay, I got it. They're talking about beer, and I'm like, would be nice to have a drink. Alright. Where was I? She tipped her hat to him. Hold on. and strolled outside, sat in the street with a cargo of guns and ammunition and landmines. It wasn't going anywhere. Scarlet stared at the truck. A vulture was sitting on its roof. It had traveled 300 miles with Scarlet so far. It was belching quietly. She looked around the street. A couple of women chatted on the street corner. A bored market vendor sat in front of a heap of colored gourds, fanning the flies. A few children played lazily in the dust. What the hell? She said quietly. I could do with a holiday anyway. That was Wednesday. By Friday, the city was a no-go area. By the following Tuesday, the economy of Kambala Land, whatever, was shattered. 20,000 people were dead, including the barman, shot by the rebels while storming the market barricades. Almost 100,000 people were injured. It's hard to drink out of the skulls of your enemies. I'm sorry. Almost 100,000 people were injured. All of Scarlet's assorted weapons had fulfilled the function for which they had been created, and the vulture had died of fatty degeneration. Scarlet was already on the last train out of the country. It was time to move on, she felt. She'd been doing arms for too damn long. She wanted a change, something with openings. She quite fancied herself a newspaper journalist. A possibility. She fanned herself with her hat and crossed her long legs in front of her. Farther down the train, a fight broke out. Scarlet grinned. People were always fighting over her and around her. It was rather sweet, really. Sable had black hair, a trim black beard, and he had just decided to go corporate. He did drinks with his accountant. How we doing, Franny? He asked her. 12 million copies sold so far. Can you believe that? They were doing drinks in a restaurant called Top of the Sixes, on top of 666 Fifth Avenue, or 666 Fifth Avenue, in New York. This was something that amused Sable ever so slightly. From the restaurant windows, you could see the whole of New York. At night, the rest of New York could see the huge red 666 that adorned all four sides of the building. Of course, it was just another street number, but if you started counting, you'd be bound to get to it eventually. But you had to smile. Sable and his accountant had just come from a small, expensive, and particularly exclusive restaurant in Greenwich Village, where the cuisine, entirely noble, had a string bean, a pea, and a sliver of chicken breast aesthetically arranged on a square china plate. Sable had invented it the last time he'd been in Paris. His accountants had polished her meat and two veg off in under 50 seconds and had spent the rest of the meal staring at the plate, the cutlery, and from time to time her fellow diners in a manner that suggested she was wondering what they'd taste like, which was in fact the case. It had amused Sable enormously. He toyed with his Perrier. 12 million, huh? That's pretty good. That's great. So, we're going corporate. It's time to blow the big one. Am I right? California, I think. I want factories, restaurants, and the whole schmear. We'll keep the publishing arm, but it's time to diversify. Yeah? Franny nodded. Sounds good, Sable. We'll need... She was interrupted by a skeleton in a Dior dress, with tan skin stretched almost to the snapping point over the delicate bones of the skull. The skeleton had long blonde hair and perfectly made-up lips. She looked like the person mothers around the world point to, muttering, "That's what'll happen to you if you don't eat your greens." She looked like a famine relief poster with style. She was New York's top fashion model, and she was holding a book. She said, excuse me, Mr. Sable. I hope you don't mind me intruding, but your book, it changed my life. I was wondering, would you mind signing it for me? She stared imploringly at him with eyes deep sunk in gloriously eyeshadowed sockets. Sable nodded graciously and took the book from her. It was not surprising that she had recognized him, for his dark gray eyes stared out from his photo on the foil embossed cover. Foodless dieting. Slim yourself beautiful. The book was called The Diet Book of the Century. How do you spell your name? He asked. Cheryl. 2 R's, 1 Y, 1 L. You remind me of an old friend, he told her as he wrote swiftly and carefully on the title page. There you go. Glad you liked it. Always good to meet a fan. What he'd written was this. Cheryl, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil in the wine. Revelation 6:6. Dr. Raven Sable. It's from the Bible, he told her. She closed the book reverently and backed away from the table. Thanking Sable, he didn't know how much this meant to her. He had changed her life. Truly, he had. He had never actually earned the medical degree he claimed, since there hadn't been any universities in those days, but Sable could see she was starving to death. He gave her a couple of months at the outside, foodless. Handle your weight problem terminally. Franny was stabbing at her laptop computer, hungrily planning the next phase in Sable's transformation of the eating habits of the Western world. Sable had brought her the machine as a personal present. It was very, very expensive, very powerful, and ultra slim. He liked slim things. There's a European outfit we can buy into for the initial toehold. Holdings Incorporated. That'll give us the Liechtenstein tax base. I'm trying so hard, guys. Bear with me, okay? I'm only an American. Now, if we channel funds out through the Caymans into Luxembourg and from there to Switzerland, we could pay for factories in... But Sable was no longer listening. He was remembering the exclusive little restaurant. It had occurred to him that he had never seen so many rich people so hungry. Sable grinned, the honest, open grin that goes with the job satisfaction, perfect and pure. He was just killing time until the main event, but he was killing it in such exquisite ways. Time and sometimes people. Sometimes he was called White, or Blanc, or Albus, or Chalky, or Wise, or Snowy, or any one of 100 other names. His skin was pale, his hair faded blonde, his eyes light gray. He was somewhere in his 20s at a casual glance, and a casual glance was all anyone ever gave him. He was almost entirely unmemorable, unlike his 2 colleagues. He could never settle down in any one job for very long. He had had all manner of interesting jobs in lots of interesting places. Very nice. He had worked the Chernobyl power station, and at Windscale, and at 3 Mile Island, always in minor jobs that weren't very important. He had been a minor, but valued member of a number of scientific research establishments. He had helped to design the petrol engine. Sorry, I'm getting slightly more crunk as we go. This is what you get. Where was I? He had been a minor but valued member of a number of scientific research establishments. He had helped to design the petrol engine and plastics and the ring pull can. He could turn his hand to anything. Nobody really noticed him. He was unobtrusive. His presence was cumulative. If you thought about it carefully, you could figure out he had to have been doing something, had to have been somewhere. Maybe he even spoke to you, but he was easy to forget. Was Mr. White. At this time, he was working as deckhand on an oil tanker heading toward Tokyo. The captain was drunk in his cabin. The first mate was in the head. The second mate was in the galley. That was pretty much it for the crew. The ship was almost completely automated. There wasn't much a person could do. However, if a person just happened to press the emergency cargo release switch on the bridge, the automatic systems would take care of releasing huge quantities of black sludge into the sea, millions of tons of crude oil with devastating effect on the birds, fish, vegetation, animals, and humans of the region. Of course, there were dozens of fail-safe interlocks and foolproof safety backups. But what the hell? There always were. Afterwards, there was a huge amount of argument as to exactly whose fault it was. In the end, it was left unresolved. The blame was apportioned equally. Neither the captain, the first mate, nor the second mate ever worked again. For some reason, nobody gave much of a thought to Seaman White, who was already halfway to Indonesia on a tramp steamer piled high with rusting metal barrels of a particularly toxic weed killer. Kind of reminds me of Fern Gully a little bit. The guy, the toxic, whatever. Anyway, I'm back to the book. And there was another. He was in the square of Cumberland, and he was in the restaurants, and he was in the fish, and in the air, and in the barrels of weed killer. He was on the roads, and in the houses, and in the palaces, and in hovels. There was nowhere that he was a stranger, and there was no getting away from him. He was doing what he did best, and what he was doing was what he was. He was not waiting, he was working. Harriet Dowling returned home with her baby, which on the service of Sister Faith Prolix, who was more persuasive than Sister Mary, and with the telephonic agreement of her husband, she had named Warlock. The cultural attaché returned home a week later and pronounced the baby the spit of his side of the family. He also had his secretary advertise in The Lady for a nanny. Crowley had seen Mary Poppins on television one Christmas. Indeed, behind the scenes, Crowley had had a hand in most television. Although it was on the invention of the game show that he truly prided himself. He toyed with the idea of a hurricane as an effective and incredibly stylish way of disposing of the queue of nannies that would certainly form or possibly stack up in the holding pattern. Outside the cultural attaché's Regent's Park residence, he contented himself with a wildcat tube strike. And when the day came, only one nanny turned up. She wore a knit tweed suit and discreet pearl earrings. Something about her might have said nanny, but it said it in an undertone of the sort of employed British butlers in a certain type of American film. It also coughed discreetly and muttered that she could well be the sort of nanny who advertises unspecified but strangely explicit services in certain magazines. Her flat shoes crunched up the graveled drive, and a gray dog padded silently by her side, white flecks of saliva dripping from its jaw. Its eyes glinted scarlet, and it glanced from side to side hungrily. She reached the heavy wooden door, smiled to herself a brief satisfied flicker, and rang the bell. It donged gloomily. The door was opened by a butler, as they say of the old school. "I am Nanny Ashtoreth," she told him. "And this," she continued, while the gray dog at her side eyed the butler carefully, working out perhaps where they would bury the bones, "is Rover." She left the dog in the garden and passed her interview with flying colors, and Mrs. Dowling led the nanny to see her new charge. She smiled unpleasantly. "What a delightful child," she said. "He'll be wanting a little tricycle soon." By one of those coincidences, another new member of staff arrived the same afternoon. He was the gardener, and as it turned out, he was amazingly good at his job. No one quite worked out why this should be the case, since he never seemed to pick up a shovel and made no effort to rid the garden of sudden flocks of birds that filled it and settled all over him at every opportunity. He just sat in the shade while around him the residents' gardens. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. There was a gnat that flew into the book. Where was I? He just sat in the shade while around him the residents' gardens bloomed and bloomed. Warlock used to come down to see him when he was old enough to toddle, and Nanny was doing whatever it was she did on her afternoons off. This here's Brother Slug, the gardener would say. Oh my God. After I have a couple drinks, the dyslexia really comes out, dog. The gardener would tell him, "And this tiny little critter is Sister Potato Weevil. Remember, Warlock, as you walk your way through the highways and byways of life's rich and fulsome path, to have love and reverence for all living things. Nanny says that living things is fit only to be wound under my heels, Mr. Funez," said little Warlock, stroking Brother Slug, and then wiping his hand conscientiously on his Kermit the Frog overall. "You don't listen to that woman," Francis would say. "You listen to me." At night, Nanny Ashtoreth sang nursery rhymes to Warlock. "Oh, the grand old Duke of York. He had 10,000 men. He marched them up to the top of the hill and then crushed the nations of the world and brought them under the rule of Satan, our master. And this little piggy went to Hades. This little piggy stayed home. This little piggy ate raw and steaming human flesh. This little piggy violated virgins. And this little piggy clambered over a heap of dead bodies to get to the top. Brother Francis, the gardener, says that I must selflessly practice virtue, and above all living things. It's hard to talk like a baby, said Warlock. You don't listen to that man, darling, the nanny would whisper as she tucked him into his little bed. You listen to me. And so it went. The arrangement worked perfectly. A no-score win. Nanny Ashworth bought the child a little tricycle, but could never persuade him to ride it inside the house, and he was scared of Rover. In the background, Crowley and Aziraphale met on the tops of buses and in art galleries and at concerts, compared notes, and smiled. When Warlock was 6, his nanny left, taking Rover with her. The gardener handed in his resignation on the same day. Neither of them left with quite the same spring in their step with which they arrived. Warlock now found himself being educated by 2 tutors. Mr. Harrison taught him about Attila the Hun, Vlad Dracula, and the darkness intricate in the human spirit. He tried to teach Warlock how to make rabble-rousing political speeches to sway the hearts and minds of multitudes. Mr. Cortez taught him about Florence Nightingale, Abraham Lincoln, and the appreciation of art. He tried to teach him about free will, self-denial, and doing unto others as you would wish them do unto you. They both read to the child extensively from the Book of Revelation. Despite their best efforts, Warlock showed a regrettable tendency to be good at maths. Neither of his tutors was entirely satisfied with his progress. When Warlock was 10, he liked baseball. He liked plastic toys that transformed into other plastic toys indistinguishable from the first set of plastic toys, except to the trained eye. He liked his stamp collection. He liked banana-flavored gum. He liked do they have banana-flavored gum? Whatever. Okay. He liked comics and cartoons and his BMX bike. If there is banana-flavored gum, somebody tell me, okay? Crowley was troubled. And they were in the cafeteria of the British Museum, another refuge for all weary foot soldiers of the Cold War. At the table to their left, 2 ramrod-straight Americans in suits were surreptitiously handing over a briefcase full of deniable dollars to a small, dark woman in glasses. At the table on the right, the deputy head of MI7 and the local KGB section officer argued over who got to keep the receipt for the tea and buns. Crowley finally said what he had not even dared to think over the last decade. If you ask me, Crowley said to his counterpart, he's too bloody normal. And he was. Hold up. Aziraphale popped another deviled egg into his mouth and washed it down with coffee. He dabbled his lips with a paper napkin. It's my good influence, he beamed, or rather credit, where credit's due. That of my little team. Crowley shook his head. I'm taking that into account. Look, by now he should be trying to warp the world around him to his own desires, shaping it in his own image, that kind of stuff. Well, not actually trying. He'll do it without even knowing it. Have you seen any evidence of that happening? Well, no, but by now he should be a powerhouse of raw force, is he? Well, not as far as I've noticed, but he's too normal, Crowley drummed his fingers on the table. I don't like it. There's something wrong. I just can't put my finger on it. Aziraphale helped himself to Crowley's slice of angel cake. Well, he's a growing boy, and of course, there's been the heavenly influence in his life. Crowley sighed. I just hope he'll know how to cope with the hellhound, that's all. Aziraphale raised one eyebrow. Hellhound? On his 11th birthday, I received a message from Hell last night. The message had come during the Golden Girls, one of Crowley's favorite television programs. Rose had taken 10 minutes to deliver what could have been quite a brief communication, and by that time, non-infernal service was restored. Crowley had quite lost the thread of the plot. They're sending him a hellhound to pad by his side and guard him from all harm. Biggest one they've got. Won't people remark on the sudden appearance of a huge black dog? His parents' first art. Crowley stood up suddenly, treading on the foot of a Bulgarian cultural attaché who was talking animatedly. I know words. I swear to God. Animatedly. And whatever. Animatedly. Okay. You're welcome. To the keeper of Her Majesty's antiques. Nobody's going to notice anything out of the ordinary. It's reality, Angel. And young Warlock can do what he wants to that, whether he knows it or not. When does it turn up then, this dog? Does it have a name? I told you, on his 11th birthday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it'll sort of home in on him. He's supposed to name it himself. It's very important that he names it himself. It gives it its purpose. It'll be killer or terror or stalks by night, I expect. Are you going to be there? Asked the angel nonchalantly. Wouldn't miss it for the worlds, said Crowley. I do hope there's nothing too wrong with the child. We'll see how he reacts to the dog anyway. That should tell us something. I hope he'll send it back or be frightened of it. If he does name it, we've lost. He'll have all his powers, and Armageddon is just around the corner, I think, said Aziraphale, sipping his wine, which had just ceased to be a slightly vinegary Beaujolais and had become a quite acceptable but rather surprised Chateau Lafite in 1875. I think I'll see you there. Wednesday. It was a hot, fume-filled August day in central London, whatever. I know words. English wasn't my first language. I'm not from here. Warlock's 11th birthday was very well attended. There were 20 small boys and 17 small girls. There were a lot of men with identical blonde crew cuts, dark blue suits, and shoulder holsters. There was a crew of caterers who had arrived bearing jellies, cakes, and bowls of crisps. Their procession of vans was led by a vintage Bentley. The amazing Harvey and Wanda children's parties, a specialty, had both been struck down by an unexpected tummy bug, but by a providential turn of fortune, a replacement had turned up practically out of the blue, a stage musician. Everyone had his little hobby. Despite Crowley's urgent advice, Aziraphale was intending to turn his to good use. Aziraphale was particularly proud of his magical skills. He had attended a class in the 1870s run by John Mescaline, and had spent almost a year practicing sleight of hand, palming coins, and and taking rabbits out of hats. He had felt at the time quite good at it. The point was that although Aziraphale was capable of doing things that could make the entire magical circle hand in their wands, he never, no wait, the entire magic circle hand in their wands, he never applied what might be called his intrinsic powers to the practice of sleight of hand conjuring, which was a major drawback. He was beginning to wish that he'd continued practicing. Yeah. Still, he mused, it was like riding a velocipede. You never forget how his magician's coat had been a little dusty, but it felt good once it was on. Even his old patter began to come back to him. Children watched him and blinked, disdainful incomprehension. Behind the buffet, Crowley in his white waiter's coats cringed with contact embarrassment. Now then, young masters and mistresses, do you see my battered old top hat? What a shocking bad hat! As you young'uns do say, and see there's nothing in it. But bless my britches, who's this rum customer? Why, it's our furry friend, Harry the Rabbit. Look. It was in your pocket, pointed out Warlock. The other children nodded in agreement. What did he think they were, kids? Aziraphale remembered what Masqueline had told him about dealing with hecklers, making joke of it. You putting heads, and I do mean you, Mr. Fell, said the name Aziraphale had adopted at that time. Make 'em laugh, and they'll forgive you anything. Oh, so you rumbled my hat trick. He chuckled. The children stared at him impassively. You're rubbish, said Warlock. I wanted cartoons anyway. He's right, you know, agreed a small girl with a ponytail. You are rubbish, and probably a faggot. I'm sorry. That took me by surprise right then. My bad, I have to drink to that. Because he is. It's foreshadowing. Aziraphale stared desperately at Crowley. As far as he was concerned, young Warlock was obviously infernally tainted, and the sooner the black dog turned up, and the sooner they could get away from this place, the better. Now, do any of you young'uns have such a thing as threepenny bit about your persons? No, young master, then what's this I see behind your ear? I got cartoons at my birthday, announced the little girl, and I got her Transformer, and a My Little Pony, and a Decepticon attacker, and a Thunder Tank, and a... Crowley groaned. Ugh. Children's parties were obviously places where any angel with an ounce of common sense should fear to tread. Piping infant voices were raised in cynical merriment as Aziraphale dropped 3 linked metal rings. Crowley looked away. His gaze fell on a table heaped high with presents from a tall plastic structure. 2 beady little eyes stared back at him. Crowley scrutinized them for a glint of red fire. You could never be certain when you were dealing with the bureaucrats of hell. It was always possible that they had sent a gerbil instead of a dog. No, it was perfectly normal. No, it was a perfectly normal gerbil. It appeared to be living in an exciting construction of cylinders, spheres, and treadmills, such as the Spanish Inquisition would have devised if they'd had access to plastic molding press, or to a plastic molding press, whatever. He checked his watch. It had never occurred to Crowley to change its battery, which had rotted away 3 years ago previously, but it still kept perfect time. It was 2 minutes to 3. Aziraphale was getting more and more flustered. Do any of the company here assembled possess such a thing about their persons as a pocket handkerchief? No. In Victorian days, it had been unheard of for people not to carry handkerchiefs, and the trick, which involved magically producing a dove who was even now pecking irritably at Aziraphale's wrists, could not proceed without one. The angel tried to attract Crowley's attention, failed, and in desperation pointed to one of the security guards, who shifted uneasily. I know words. Okay. You, my fine Jack Sauce, come here. I love that. That's my next pickup line. You fine Jack Sauce. Sorry. Come here. Now, if you inspect your breast pocket, I think you might find a fine silk handkerchief. No, sir, my friend Nazir, said the guard, staring ahead. Okay, I'm better at French, actually. Let's be real. Better at French than English. I'm an American. Aziraphale winked desperately. Now go on, dear boy, take a look, please. The guard reached a hand inside his inside pocket, looked surprised, and pulled out a handkerchief, duck egg blue silk, with lace edging. Aziraphale realized almost immediately that the lace had been a mistake, as it caught on the guard's holstered gun and sent it spinning across the room to land heavily in a bowl of jelly. The children applauded spasmodically. Hey, not bad, said the ponytailed girl. Warlock had already run across the room and grabbed the gun. Hands up, dog breath, he shouted quickly. I'm sorry. My imagination is very vivid. Hands up. Hands up, dog breath. The security guards were in for a quandary. Okay, not bad. Hold up, gangsta. Let me pause this real fast. I'm laughing. Okay, I'm back. The security guards were in a quandary. Some of them fumbled for their own weapons. Others started edging their way toward or away from the boy. The other children started complaining that they wanted guns as well, and a few of the more forward ones started trying to tug them from the guards who had been thoughtless enough to take their weapons out. Here, let me grab my drinks. Hold up, gangstas. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Bloop, bloop. Where was I? Then someone threw some jelly at Warlock. The boy squeaked and pulled the trigger of a gun. It was a Magnum 32 CIA issue, gray, mean, heavy, capable of blowing a man away at 30 paces and leaving nothing more than a red mist, a ghastly mess, and a certain amount of paperwork. Aziraphale blinked. A thin stream of water squirted from the nozzle and soaked Crowley, who had been looking out the window trying to see if there was a huge black dog in the garden. Aziraphale looked embarrassed. Then a cream cake hit him in the face. It was almost 3:05. With a gesture, Aziraphale turned the rest of the guns into water pistols as well and walked out. Crowley found him on the pavement outside, trying to extricate a rather squishy dove from the arm of his frock coat. "It's late, Aziraphale," said Aziraphale. "I can see that," said Crowley. "Comes of sticking it up your sleeve." He reached out and pulled the limp bird from Aziraphale's coat and breathed life back into it. The dove cooed appreciatively and flew off, a trifle warily. "Not the bird," said the angel. "The dog. It's late." Crowley shook his head thoughtfully. "We'll see." He opened the car door, flipped on the radio. "I should be so lucky, 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 lucky. I should be so lucky." And "Hello, Crowley." "Hello, who is this?" "Dagon, Lord of the Flies, Master of Madness, Underduke of the Seventh Torment. What can I do for you?" "The Hellhound. I'm just checking that it got off okay. Released 10 minutes ago. Why? Hasn't it arrived? Is something wrong?" "Oh no, nothing's wrong. Everything's fine. Oops, I can see it now. Good dog. Nice dog. Everything's terrific. You're doing a great job down there. People. Well, lovely talking to you, Dagon. Catch you soon, huh?" He flipped off the radio. They stared at each other. There was a loud bang from the inside of the house, and a window shattered. "Oh dear," muttered Aziraphale, not swearing with the practiced ease of one who has spent 6,000 years not swearing, and who wasn't going to start now. "I must have missed one." "No dog," said Crowley. "No dog," said Aziraphale. And the demon sighed. "Get in the car," he said. "We've got to talk about this. Oh, and Aziraphale." "Yes?" "Clean off that blasted cream cake before you get in." It was a hot, silent August day, far from central London, by the side of Tadfield Road. The dust weighed down the hogweed. Bees buzzed in the hedges. The air had a leftover and reheated feel. I almost said fuel. I can see, okay. Kinda. There was a sound like 1,000 metal voices shouting, "Hail!" cut off abruptly. And there was a black dog in the road. It had to be a dog. It was dog-shaped. There are some dogs which, when you meet them, remind you that despite thousands of years of man-made evolution, every dog is still only 2 meals away from being a wolf. These dogs advanced deliberately, purposefully, and the wilderness made flesh, their teeth yellow, their breath a stink, while in the distance their owners twitter, "He's an old soppy, really. Just poke him if he is a nuisance." And in the green of their eyes and the red campfires of the Pleistocene gleam and flicker. This dog would make even a dog like that slink nonchalantly behind the sofa and pretend to be extremely preoccupied with its rubber bone. It was already growling, and the growl was low. Like that. It was just like that. Okay. Rumbling snarl of spring-coiled menace. The sort of growl that starts in the back of the throat and ends up in someone else's. Like I said, it was like, you know, you get it. Saliva dripped from its jaws and sizzled on the tar. It took a few steps forward and sniffed the sullen air. Its ears flicked up. This kind of... Okay, hold up. I'm going to do a little interlude real fast because this reminds me exactly of when Hercules got his little guy. What was his name? What's the fucking horse's name? Hercules and... starts with a P. Not Perseus. Oh my god. Okay, well, anyway, Zeus's son also had a similar thing with his fucking flying horse. What was that? It was I've had a couple drinky poos. Okay. It's gonna drive me crazy. Not Philippians, that's Bible. Whatever. I'll think of it later. Its ears flicked up. There were voices a long way off. A voice, a boyish voice, but one it had been created to obey. Could not help but to obey. When that voice said follow, it would follow. When it said kill, it would kill. His master's voice. It let... Wait. Not Hercules. Jesus Christ. I almost had it. I almost had the name. It's fucking... Oh my god, that's gonna drive me crazy. Hercules and... Morgana. I'm sorry. I have to think of the name because it's driving me fucking crazy. Not Presley. Okay, whatever. It'll come to me. There were voices a long way off. A voice, a boyish voice, but one it had been created. Oh wait, I already said that. Okay. It leapt the hedge and padded across the field and beyond. It's not Perseus. Perseus was Hercules' brother. I'm gonna have to think about this. Okay. Just deal with my ass. Or don't. Whatever. A grazing bull eyed it for a moment, weighed its chances, and strolled hurriedly toward the opposite hedge. The voices were coming from a copse of straggly trees. The black hound slunk closer, jaws streaming. One of the other voices said, "He never will. You're always saying he will, and he never does. Catch your dad giving you a pet, and an interesting pet anyway. It'll probably be stick insects. That's your dad's idea of interesting." And the hound gave the canine equivalent of a shrug, but immediately lost interest because now the master, the center of the universe, spoke. "It'll be a dog," it said. "Huh? You don't know it's going to be a dog." "No one said it's going to be a dog." "How do you know it's going to be a dog if no one said?" "Your dad, he'd be complaining about the food it eats the whole time." "Prove it." Wait. It's awfully close. Oh my god. It's awfully close, isn't it? It's not Persephone. Oh my god. You know, if you know, you better put it in the fucking comments because this is driving me crazy, actually. What's the fucking horse's name? Whatever. Whatever. Anyway. Where was I? The voices were coming from a copse of straggly trees. The black hound slunk closer, jaws streaming. I'm sorry, hold on. I have to think about this really hard, so hold on. It's driving me crazy. I might look it up. It's fucking Pegasus. Oh my god, it's Pegasus. It took me all this time. I was literally like, okay, I found it. I knew it was like that. It was like Perseus or something. It's fucking Pegasus. That's what this story reminds me of, when Hercules got Pegasus. Man, that was a fucking day. Anyway, so where was I? You're always saying he will, but he never does. Catch your dad giving you a pet. An interesting pet, anyway. It'll probably... Oh, wait. I already said that. The hound gave the canine equivalent of a shrug, but immediately lost its interest because now the master, the center of the universe, spoke. It'll be a dog. Huh? You don't know it's gonna be a dog. No one said it's going to be a dog. How'd you know it's going to be a dog if no one said? Your dad'd be complaining about the food it eats the whole time. Privet. This third voice was rather more prim than the first two. The owner of a voice like that would be the sort of person who, before making a plastic model kit, would not only separate and count all the parts before commencing, as per instructions, but also paint the bits that needed painting first and leave them to dry properly prior to construction. All that separated this voice from chartered accountancy was a matter of time. They don't eat privet, Wensley. You never saw a dog eating privet. Stick insects do. I mean, they're jolly interesting, actually. They eat each other when they're mating. There was a thoughtful pause. The hound slunk closer and realized that the voices were coming from a hole in the ground. The trees, in fact, concealed an ancient chalk quarry, now half overgrown with thorn trees and vines, ancient but clearly not disused. Oh my god. Whatever. I know words. Tracks crisscrossed it. Smooth areas of slope indicated regular use by skateboards, and wall of death, or at least of dangerously frayed rope, hung from some of the more accessible greenery. Here and there, sheets of corrugated iron and old wooden boards were wedged in branches. A burnt-out, rusting Triumph Herald estate was visible, half submerged in a drift of nettles. In one corner, a tangle of wheels and corroded wire marked the site of the famous lost graveyard, where the supermarket trolleys came to die. If you were a child, it was paradise. The local adults called it the pit. The hound peered through the clump of nettles and spotted 4 figures sitting in the center of the quarry, on that indispensable prop to good secret dens. Everywhere, the common milk crate. They don't. They do. Bet you they don't, said the first speaker. It had a certain timbre to it that identified it as young and female, and it was tinted with horrified fascination. They do, actually. I had 6 before we went on holiday, I forgot to change the privet. And when I came back, I had one big fat one. Nah, that's not stick insects. That's praying mantises. I saw on the television where where this big female one ate this other one, and it didn't hardly take any notice. There was another crowded pause. What are they praying about? said said his master's voice. Dunno, praying. They don't have to get married, I expect. The hound managed to get one huge eye against an empty knothole in the quarry's broken down fence and squinted downward. Anyway, it's like with bikes, said the first speaker authoritatively. I thought I was going to get this bike with 7 gears and one of them razor blade saddles and purple paint and everything. And they gave me this light blue one with a basket, a girl's bike. Just a girl's bike. There was a hole in my lip. Anyway, back to where I was. Where was I? Well, you're a girl, said one of the others. That's sexism. That is, going around giving people girly presents just because they're a girl. I'm going to get a dog, said his master's voice firmly. His master had his back to him. The hound couldn't quite make out his features. Oh, yeah, one of those great Rottweilers. Yeah, said the girl with withering sarcasm. No, it's going to be the kind of dog you can have fun with, said his master's voice. Not a big dog, but one of those dogs that's brilliantly intelligent and can go down rabbit holes and has one funny ear that always looks inside out, and a proper mongrel too, a pedigree mongrel, unheard by those within. There was a tiny clap of thunder on the lip of the quarry. It might have been caused by the sudden rushing of air into the vacuum caused by a very large dog becoming, for example, a small dog. And a tiny popping noise that followed might have been caused by one ear turning itself inside out. And I'll call him, said his master's voice. I'll call him. Yes, said the girl. What are you going to call it? The hound waited. This was the moment. The naming. Yeah, this happened with Pegasus too. I feel like they're taking whatever. They're taking different stories. Just saying. The hound waited. This was the moment. The naming. This would give it its purpose, its function, its identity, its eyes glowed a dull red, even though they were a lot closer to the ground, and it dribbled into the nettles. Bleh. I'll call him Dog, said the master positively. It saves a lot of trouble, a name like that. The hellhound paused, deep in its diabolical canine brain. It knew that something was wrong, but it was nothing if not obedient. And its great sudden love of its master overcame all misgivings. Who was it to say what size it should be anyway? It trotted down the slope to meet its destiny. Strange though, it had always wanted to jump up at people, but now it realized that against all expectation, it wanted to wag its tail at the same time. You said it was him, moaned Aziraphale, abstractedly picking the final lump of cream cake from his lapel. He licked his fingers clean. It was him, said Crowley. I mean, I should know, shouldn't I? Then someone else must be interfering. There isn't anyone else. There's just us, right? Good and evil, one side or the other. He thumped the steering wheel. You'll be amazed at the kind of things they can do to you down there, he said. I imagine they're very similar to the sort of things they can do to one up there, said Aziraphale. Come off it. Your lot get ineffable mercy, said Crowley sourly. Yes? Did you ever visit Gomorrah? Sure, said the demon. There was this great little tavern where you could get these terrific fermented date palm cocktails with nutmeg and crushed lemongrass. That sounds amazing, actually. Sorry. I meant afterwards. Oh, Aziraphale said. Something must have happened in the hospital. It couldn't have. It was full of our people. Whose people? Said Aziraphale coldly. My people, corrected Crowley. Well, not my people. You know, Satanists. He tried to say it dismissively. Apart from, of course, the fact that the world was an amazing, interesting place, which they both wanted to enjoy for as long as possible. There were a few things that the two of them agreed on, but they did not see eye to eye about some of those people who, for one reason or another, were inclined to worship the Prince of Darkness. Crowley always found them embarrassing. You couldn't actually be rude to them, but you couldn't help feeling about them the same way that, say, a Vietnam veteran would feel about someone who wears a combat gear to a neighborhood watch meetings. Besides, they were always so depressingly enthusiastic. Take all that stuff with the inverted crosses and pentagrams and cockerels. You know, I'm gonna have a little interruption right here, actually. Inverted crosses are not actually satanic. If you actually have read the Bible, the upside down cross actually represents the cross of St. Peter, who was crucified upside down after Jesus. But anyway, that's my own little interlude, and I'm done. Back to where I was. Crowley always found them embarrassing, because they are. You couldn't actually be rude to them, but you could not feel in the same way. I already read that. Don't mind me. I'm the worst at audiobooks. I don't know why y'all watch me, but whatever, I'm here. I'm here and I'm queer and I got this. Besides, they were always so depressingly enthusiastic. Take all that stuff with the inverted crosses and pentagrams and cockerels. It mystified most demons. It wasn't the least bit necessary. All you needed to become a Satanist was an effort of will. You could be one all your life without ever knowing what a pentagram was, without ever seeing a dead cockerel, other than a chicken marengo. Besides, some of the old-style Satanists tended, in fact, to be quite nice people. They mouthed words and went through the motions just like the people they thought of as their opposite numbers, and then went home and lived lives of mildly unassuming mediocrity for the rest of the week, with never an unusually evil thought in their heads, which is funny because it's the opposite for Christians. And as for the rest, there were people who called themselves Satanists who made Crowley squirm. It wasn't just the things they did, it was the way they blamed it all on hell. They'd come up with some stomach-churning idea that no demon could have thought of in 1,000 years. some dark, mindless unpleasantness that only a fully functioning human brain could conceive, then shout, "The devil made me do it!" and get the sympathy of the court when the whole point was that the devil hardly ever made anyone do anything. He didn't have to. That was what some humans found so hard to understand. Hell wasn't a major reservoir of evil, any more than heaven, in Crowley's opinion, was a fountain of goodness. And they were just sides in the great cosmic chess game. Where you found the real McCoy, the real Grace, and the real heart-stopping evil was right inside the human mind. Huh? said Aziraphale. Satanists? I don't see how they could have messed it up, said Crowley. I mean, 2 babies, it's not exactly taxing, is it? He stopped. Though the mist of memories, he pictured a small nun who had struck him at the time as being remarkably loose-headed, even for a Satanist. And there had been someone else, Crowley vaguely recalled, as a pipe and a cardigan with the kind of zigzag pattern that went out of style in 1938. A man with expectant father written all over him. There must have been a 3rd baby, he told Aziraphale. Not a lot to go on, said the angel. We know the child must be alive, said Crowley. So, how do we know? If it had turned up down there again, do you think I'd be sitting here? Good point. So, all we've got to do is find it, said Crowley. Go through the hospital records. The Bentley's engine coughed into life. Car leapt forward, forcing Aziraphale back into the seat. And then what? He said. And then we find the child. And then what? The angel shut his eyes as the car crabbed around the corner. Don't know. Good grief. I suppose. Get off the road, you clown. Your people wouldn't consider in the scooter you rode on giving me asylum. I was going to ask you the same thing. Watch out for the pedestrian. It's on the street. It knows the risks it's taking, said Crowley, easing the accelerating car between a parked car and a taxi, leaving a space which would have barely accepted even the best credit card. Watch the road! Watch the road! Where's this hospital anyway? Somewhere south of Oxford. Aziraphale grabbed the dashboard. You can't do 90 miles an hour in central London. Crowley peered at the dial. Why not? He said. You'll get us killed. Aziraphale hesitated, inconveniently discorporated. He corrected, lamely, relaxing a little. Anyway, you might kill other people. Crowley shrugged. The angel had never really come to grips with the 20th century and didn't realize that it's perfectly possible to do 90 miles an hour down Oxford Street. You just arranged matters so that no one was in the way, and since everyone knew it was impossible to do 90 miles an hour down Oxford Street, no one noticed. Alright, I'm gonna stop here because your boy's a little crunk. Alright, and as much as I've been enjoying this book, I should probably be crunk off camera. So, yes. Thank you for watching. Namaste. I will see you soon.